3 days had passed since Jinwoo woke from death. He spent most of that time in a Valori healing chamber. His body adjusting to changes he was only beginning to understand. The wound in his chest had sealed into a scar that glowed faint silver in dim light. His senses had sharpened in ways that felt impossible. And sometimes he could hear whispers of emotion that did not belong to him. He was not entirely human anymore. He was not sure what he was, Princess. Seraphel visited him every day, sitting beside his bed and answering his endless questions about what had happened. She explained the binding of souls with patience and care, never making him feel foolish for not understanding. The ritual has not been performed in 3,000 years, she told him. The last attempt ended in tragedy when both participants died within a week. Scholars believed the bond was simply too dangerous to attempt. But my mother believed your human nature would make the difference. And she was right? It seems so, Seraphel said with a soft smile. Your consciousness was not connected to our collective like a Valori soul would be. There was no conflict, no pull in opposing directions. You were simply adrift, and she was able to anchor you without resistance. Jinwoo looked at his hands. Still human in appearance, but somehow different in ways he could feel but not describe. What happens now? What am I supposed to do with this second life I did not ask for? That is for you to decide, the princess replied. But my mother has an offer for you. If you are willing to hear it. Queen Aethera came to see him later that evening. After the healers had pronounced him recovered enough for extended conversation, she looked different to his new senses. Her presence radiating ancient power and quiet authority that he could feel pressing against his awareness, but underneath that, he sensed something he had not expected: vulnerability. She had given part of herself to save him. And that sacrifice had created a connection neither of them fully understood. You are adjusting well, she observed, taking a seat beside his bed with grace that made the simple motion seem like ceremony. The healers tell me your human biology is accepting the Valori energy without rejection. That is a better outcome than I had dared to hope. I appreciate what you did for me, Jinwoo said carefully, but I still do not understand why. Your daughter was safe. The assassins were dead. There was no need to risk yourself for someone like me, someone like you. Aethera repeated thoughtfully. And what kind of someone is that? A soldier, a guard, a human who was simply doing his job. The queen shook her head slowly. You still do not see yourself clearly. You still believe that what you did was ordinary, unremarkable, something any person would have done in your situation. Would they not have? No, Aethera said with absolute certainty. They would not have. I touched the minds of many beings in that moment of crisis, Jinwoo. The Valori honor guard was paralyzed but conscious, and their thoughts were of fear and self-preservation. The Kreth assassins thought only of their mission and their rewards. Even the other humans in the room hesitated, calculating risks and odds before acting. But you did not hesitate, not for a single heartbeat. You saw my daughter in danger, and you moved to protect her without any thought for yourself. She leaned forward, her silver eyes meeting his. That is not ordinary. That is not what any person would do. That is something rare and precious and worth preserving beyond all cost. Jinwoo was silent for a long moment. I have never thought of myself as special, he said finally. I grew up in a small town on Earth, the son of farmers who worked hard and expected little. I became a soldier because I was good at protecting people. And I became a guard because it seemed safer than combat. I have no great ambitions, no dreams of glory or power. I just want to help people who need helping. And that, Aethera said softly, is exactly why I could not let you die. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars that surrounded the diplomatic vessel. I have an offer for you, Sergeant Park. You may refuse it without consequence, and I will arrange transport back to Earth where you can resume whatever life you choose. But I hope you will consider accepting. What is the offer? A position in my court, the queen replied. Not as a guard or a servant, but as something new. The binding has connected you to our collective in a limited way. You can sense our emotions. And in time, you may develop abilities beyond what any human has possessed. I want you to use these gifts as a bridge between our peoples. She turned to face him. Humanity proved its worth tonight. Not through technology or military power, but through the courage of a single individual who chose sacrifice over survival. I believe this is the foundation upon which a true alliance can be built. And I want you to help me build it. Jinwoo considered the offer carefully. He thought about Earth, about the life he had left behind when he took this assignment. There was nothing waiting for him there. No family, no close friends, no purpose beyond the next contract. Here, he had a chance to do something meaningful, to stand as proof that humans and Valori could work together, could understand each other, could become something greater than either species alone. I accept, he said. Not for glory or reward, but because I think you are right. I think our peoples need each other, and I think someone has to stand in the gap between them. Ithera smiled, and for a moment she looked almost young despite her ancient years. I knew you would say that. The weeks that followed brought sweeping changes to galactic politics. The Kreth Dominion faced severe consequences for the assassination attempt. Their ambassador imprisoned and their expansion halted by a coalition that had not existed before. The alliance between Valori and humanity grew stronger with each passing day. Built not on treaties and calculations, but on the foundation of one man's sacrifice, Princess Seraphel began studying human culture with passionate dedication. Determined to understand the species that had produced someone like Jinwoo, she spent hours talking with him, learning about Earth's history and customs and the strange beautiful resilience of beings who lived such brief lives. Jinwoo adapted slowly to his new existence. He learned to control the emotional sensitivity that sometimes overwhelmed him. He developed a working relationship with the court that respected his unique position, and he found, to his surprise, that he was content in a way he had never been before. One evening, standing on the observation deck where he had first spoken with Sorrowful, he felt the Queen's presence before she appeared. The bond between them had grown comfortable over time. A quiet connection that asked nothing but offered constant reassurance. You are thinking deep thoughts, Ithera observed, joining him at the window. I am thinking about choices, Jinwoo replied. About the moments that define who we become. And what conclusions have you reached? He smiled, the expression still strange on a face that had once belonged to a dead man. That sometimes the most important choice is the simplest one. To protect someone who needs protecting, regardless of the cost. Everything else follows from that. The Queen nodded, her markings glowing soft violet in the starlight. The humans have a saying I have grown fond of, she said. Something about planting trees whose shade you will never sit in. That sounds about right, Jinwoo agreed. We do not do good things because we expect to benefit from them. We do them because they need to be done. And that is why humanity will inherit the stars someday, Ithera said quietly. Not because you are the strongest or the smartest or the longest lived, but because you understand something that older species have forgotten. What is that? That love without expectation of return is the most powerful force in the universe. She placed her hand on his arm, a gesture of connection that transcended the boundaries between their species. Thank you, Jinwoo Park, for saving my daughter, for accepting my gift, for showing us what humanity truly is. He covered her hand with his own, feeling the warmth of the bond they shared. Thank you for not letting me go. Together, they watched the stars. Two souls bound across the impossible divide between species, standing as proof that even in the vast cold darkness of space, light would always find a way. And somewhere in the distance, the future waited, shaped by the choice of one human who had refused to let fear overcome compassion. This was his legacy. This was what it meant to be human, not power or conquest or dominion over others, but simply the willingness to stand between darkness and those who needed protecting forever and always, no matter the cost. The veil was not what Jinwoo had expected death to be. There was no bright light, no tunnel, no chorus of angels or reunion with lost loved ones. There was only vast emptiness stretching in every direction. A gray expanse where up and down held no meaning. He drifted through it like a leaf on still water, feeling himself grow lighter with each passing moment. His memories were beginning to fade. He could no longer remember his mother's face or the sound of his father's voice. His childhood home had become a blur of colors without shape. Even his own name felt distant, a word that belonged to someone else, but one memory remained clear and sharp, refusing to dissolve like the others. A young princess with silver eyes and violet markings, frozen in terror as death approached her, and his choice, instant and absolute, to place himself between her and the blade. Did she survive? The question echoed through the void, the only thought he could still form with clarity. Everything else was fading. But that question remained. He needed to know. He needed to know that his sacrifice had meant something. A light appeared in the distance. At first Jinwoo thought it was his imagination, a final hallucination before consciousness ended completely. But the light grew brighter and moved toward him with purpose. It was silver and violet. Colors he recognized, colors that reminded him of something important. Human, a voice called out. Resonant and ancient and impossibly warm. Jinwoo Park, can you hear me? He wanted to respond, but he had no voice, no body, no way to form words. The light reached him and wrapped around what remained of his consciousness. He felt warmth for the first time since the blade had pierced his chest. He felt connection, like a rope thrown to a drowning man. I have you, the voice said. You are not lost yet, Queen Ethera? How did he know that name? How could she be here in this place, between life and death? Your daughter, he managed to think, the words forming without sound. Is she safe? She is safe, Ethera replied, and he felt her consciousness touching his with impossible gentleness. Because of you, my daughter lives. You saved her, Jinwoo. You gave everything for her without hesitation. Relief flooded through him, the only emotion strong enough to penetrate the numbness of death. Good, he thought. That is good. Then it was worth it. It was worth more than you know, the queen said. Which is why I am here. Which is why I refuse to let you go. Confusion stirred in his fading awareness. You should let me go. This is how it works for my kind. We do our part, and then we rest. There is no shame in it, no sorrow. It is simply the way things are. Perhaps for other humans, Ethera agreed. But not for you, not now. You created a debt tonight that cannot be repaid through normal means. Among my people, such sacrifice is honored with eternal remembrance in the collective consciousness. Your soul would live forever in the memories of all Valori, but you are not Valori, and I cannot give you that gift. I did not do it for gifts or rewards. Jinwoo protested weakly. I did it because it was right, because your daughter did not deserve to die, because I could stop it, and so I had to try. That is all. He felt something from the queen then, an emotion that translated imperfectly across the barrier between their minds. It was wonder, mixed with sadness, mixed with determination. Do you understand what you just said? Ethera asked. You just explained the purest form of heroism that exists. You acted without thought of reward, without hope of survival, without any expectation beyond the deed itself. In 10,000 years of existence, I have rarely encountered such clarity of purpose. I am nothing special, Jinwoo thought. I am just a soldier who was in the right place at the right time. No, the Queen said firmly. "You are a soul that burns brighter than any I have ever touched, and I will not let that light be extinguished." He felt her power flowing into him, silver energy weaving through the fragments of his consciousness. It was strange and warm and utterly alien. But somehow it did not feel wrong. It felt like being found after being lost. It felt like being remembered after being forgotten. "What are you doing?" he asked. "I am binding you to life," Ethera replied. "I am giving you a piece of my own existence to anchor your soul to the mortal realm. The process is ancient and dangerous, and it has never been attempted with a human before. But I believe it will work. I believe your alien nature may actually be an advantage. Why would you do this? I am nobody to you. I am just a human guard who did his job. You are the being who saved my daughter," the Queen said simply. "You are the soul that faced death with no fear and no regret, only concern for someone else. How could I possibly let such a spirit fade into nothing?" Jinwoo wanted to argue further, but he felt the ritual taking hold. Energy poured into him, filling the emptiness that death had created. He could feel his memories stabilizing, his sense of self growing stronger. The gray void began to recede, replaced by sensations he had thought lost forever. Pain, yes, but also warmth. Loneliness, yes, but also connection. And something new, something he had never experienced before. He could feel the Queen's presence not just touching his consciousness, but linking with it. He could sense her emotions, her determination, her ancient and profound compassion. It was like suddenly developing a new sense, like a blind person seeing color for the first time. "This bond will change you," Ethera warned. "You will live longer than a human should. You will sense the emotions of those connected to you. You will never truly be alone again, whether you wish for solitude or not. These are the consequences of the binding, and I cannot undo them once the ritual is complete." "And what are the consequences for you?" A pause, heavy with things unspoken. "I will give years of my life to sustain yours. How many, I cannot say. Perhaps a century, perhaps more. The bond will tie us together until one of us truly dies. Your pain will echo in me. Your joy will be my joy. We will be connected in ways that have no human equivalent." "That is too high a price," Jinwoo protested. "You barely know me. You cannot sacrifice part of your life for a stranger." "You sacrificed all of yours for my daughter," Ethera replied. "A stranger you had spoken with for mere minutes. How is what I am doing any different?" He had no answer for that. "Come back, Jinwoo Park," the Queen commanded, and her voice carried the weight of royal authority that had guided a civilization for millennia. "Come back to life. There is still more for you to do, more for you to be. The universe is not finished with you yet, and despite everything, despite the peace he had found in fading away, despite the acceptance he had made of his own ending," Jinwoo found himself reaching for her hand. He chose to live in the medical bay of the celestial harmony. Monitors began to beep with sudden activity. A heartbeat appeared on screens that had shown flat lines for nearly an hour. Jinwoo's chest rose with a shuddering breath, and his eyes opened to reveal irises that now held flecks of silver among the brown. Queen Ethera collapsed beside the table, exhausted by the ritual, but smiling with profound satisfaction. She had done it. She had pulled a human soul back from beyond the veil, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be quite the same again. The medical bay fell silent as the human doctors stepped back from the body on the table. Their equipment showed flat lines where heartbeats should have been. Their scanners detected no brain activity by every measure their science could provide. Sergeant Jinwoo Park was dead. Time of death: 2347 ship standard, the lead physician announced, his voice heavy with the weight of failure. Cause of death: cardiac arrest secondary to Valori neurotoxin exposure. I am sorry, Your Majesty, We did everything we could. Queen Ethera stood motionless near the doorway, watching the scene with eyes that had witnessed countless deaths across 10,000 years of existence. She had ruled her people through wars and plagues, through the rise and fall of empires, through tragedies that had claimed millions of lives. Death was not unfamiliar to her, but something about this. Death felt different. Something about this. Human refused to let her accept the finality of his ending. "Leave us," she commanded. The physicians exchanged uncertain glances. "Your Majesty, there are procedures we must follow. The body needs to be prepared for." "I said leave us," Ethera repeated, and her bioluminescent markings flared with the cold blue of royal authority. Now, they left without further argument. Even those who had served her for centuries knew better than to challenge the queen when she spoke in that tone. Ethera approached the table where Jinwoo's body lay. The wound in his chest had been cleaned and covered. A small mercy for a man who would never know the difference. His face was peaceful, almost serene, as if he had simply fallen asleep. She placed her hand on his forehead and let her consciousness drift into the space between life and death. The Valari called this place the Veil, a threshold realm where souls paused before moving beyond mortal reach. As queen, Ethera possessed the rare ability to touch this boundary, to ease the transition of her people's spirits into the collective consciousness that awaited them. She had never attempted to use this power for a human before. She had never imagined she would want to, but here she stood, reaching across the void for a soul that did not belong to her species, searching for an ember that should have already faded into nothing. And there he was, faint and distant, but undeniably present. The human's consciousness drifted at the edge of dissolution, solitary in a way that made her ancient heart ache. The Valori never faced death alone. Their spirits were always welcomed by the collective, embraced by ancestors and descendants alike. But humans had no such comfort. They faced the end as they faced everything else in their brief lives, alone and uncertain. Yet there was no fear in Jinwoo's fading awareness, only a quiet acceptance and a single lingering question that echoed through the void. Did she survive? Ethera withdrew from the veil and opened her eyes. Her advisors had gathered outside the medical bay, their anxious whispers carrying through the door. She ignored them and turned to her daughter, who had refused to leave despite the command to clear the room. "Mother," Seraphel said quietly, "what are you doing?" "I am considering something that has not been done for 3,000 years," Ethera replied. "Something that may be impossible and is certainly unprecedented." "What do you mean?" The queen looked at the body on the table, at the man who had given everything for her daughter without hesitation or expectation of reward. "There is an ancient rite called the binding of souls. In ages past, our greatest heroes were preserved through this ritual, their consciousness anchored to the living world by the life force of the monarch. It was banned after the last attempt resulted in tragedy. The bond proved unstable, and both parties perished." Seraphel's eyes widened. "You cannot be considering this for him. He's not Valori. His soul is not compatible with our collective. The ritual would surely fail." "Perhaps," Ethera acknowledged, "or perhaps his alien nature is exactly what makes this possible. Our previous failures occurred because Valori souls are already connected to the collective. The pull was too strong in both directions, but this human has no such connection. He's entirely self-contained, entirely individual." "Mother, the risk is mine to take," the queen interrupted firmly. "I have ruled for 10,000 years, Seraphel. I have witnessed courage and sacrifice in forms beyond counting. But I have never seen anything quite like what this human did tonight. He knew he would die. He knew there would be no reward, no recognition, no continuation of any kind. And still he threw himself between you and death without a moment of hesitation." She paused, her markings shifting to a deep violet that spoke of profound emotion among our people. Such sacrifice creates a debt that transcends normal obligation. If he had been Valori, his name would be carved into the eternal stones, and his consciousness would be honored in the collective forever. But because he is human, because his species expects nothing beyond death, he would simply cease to exist. I find that I cannot accept this outcome. The door opened and her chief advisor entered despite the command to stay out. Your Majesty, I must protest. What you are contemplating is forbidden for good reason. The binding of souls requires you to sacrifice a portion of your own life force. Years, perhaps decades of your existence would be given to sustain this human. And for what? A being who would have died naturally within a few more decades anyway. For what? Ethera turned to face him, and her eyes blazed with silver fire. For the soul that saved my daughter, for the consciousness that chose death rather than let harm reach my heir. For the only being in this room who acted with pure selfless courage, while everyone else hesitated and calculated and protected themselves. She walked to the table and placed both hands on Jinwoo's chest. This human taught me something tonight. He taught me that true heroism does not require oaths or bloodlines or the promise of eternal reward. It requires only the choice to stand between darkness and light, to protect those who cannot protect themselves, regardless of the cost. Her markings began to glow with increasing intensity. I will not let such a soul disappear into nothing. I refuse. The advisor stepped back as power began to radiate from the Queen. Majesty, please, at least consider the political implications. If you bind yourself to this human, if you share your life force with an alien species, the Council will accept my decision, Ethera said coldly, because I am their queen, and because this is the right thing to do. She closed her eyes and began the ancient words of the ritual. Light poured from her hands into Jinwoo's body. Silver and violet intertwined. Seraphel watched in amazement as her mother's markings dimmed slightly while the human's wound began to glow. The advisors fled the room, unable to bear the intensity of the power being channeled. Only Seraphel remained, witnessing something that had not been seen for 3,000 years. The Queen was reaching into the space between life and death, and she was pulling a human soul back from the edge of oblivion. I have you, Ethera whispered into the void, feeling Jinwoo's consciousness respond to her touch. You are not finished yet. There is more for you to do, more for you to be. Come back. In the darkness of the veil, Jinwoo's fading awareness flickered with confusion. A voice was calling him. A hand was reaching for him. And despite every expectation he had ever held about death, he found himself reaching back. The ceremonial dinner had reached its midpoint when the lights flickered for just a heartbeat. Most of the delegates barely noticed, their attention fixed on the Kreth ambassador delivering a speech about mutual prosperity and shared futures. But Jinwoo noticed. He noticed everything now, his senses sharpened by hours of watching and waiting for something terrible to unfold. The three suspicious Kreth attendants had shifted positions again. They now formed a tighter pattern around Princess Seraphel and the Valori royal delegation. Their movements were too coordinated to be coincidence, too precise to be innocent. Jinwoo touched his earpiece and spoke quietly to the other human security personnel. Heads up. I think we have a situation developing. Watch the Kreth servants near the royal table. Static crackled in response, followed by a confused voice. Park. Our communications just went fuzzy. Say again? That was when Jinwoo knew for certain communications jamming meant this was not paranoia, but a planned operation. He started moving toward the princess, abandoning subtlety for speed. The Kreth ambassador finished his speech and raised a glass for a toast. Every delegate lifted their drinks in response. A moment of unity that should have symbolized hope. Instead, It became the signal for chaos. The three Kreth attendants drew weapons from beneath their uniforms. Blades that gleamed with an oily purple coating. They moved with military precision, cutting down the nearest Valori guards before anyone could react. At the same moment, a high-pitched whine filled the air. Jinwoo recognized it as a neural disruptor, a weapon designed to overwhelm nervous systems with targeted frequencies. The Valori honor guard collapsed almost instantly, their elegant forms crumpling as their bioluminescent markings flickered wildly. The weapon was calibrated specifically for Valori biology. Jinwoo stumbled as the disruptor hit him too, pain lancing through his skull like hot needles. His vision blurred and his legs threatened to buckle. But human nervous systems were different from Valori ones. The disruptor hurt him, disoriented him, but it did not paralyze him completely. He forced himself forward through sheer determination, his hand finding his sidearm despite fingers that felt numb and clumsy. Screams filled the banquet hall as diplomats scrambled for cover. The Kreth assassins ignored the chaos around them. Focused entirely on their target, Princess Seraphel stood frozen near the royal table, her silver eyes wide with shock as she watched her honor guard fall around her. The lead assassin approached her with cold efficiency, his blade raised for a killing strike. Jinwoo did not think. There was no time for calculation or strategy. He simply acted, throwing himself between the princess and the descending blade. Steel met flesh with a wet sound that seemed too quiet for the damage it caused. The blade punched through Jinwoo's chest, sliding between his ribs with terrible ease. He felt cold spreading from the wound, the neurotoxin coating the blade beginning its work, even as blood poured down his uniform. But he was not done yet. His hand came up with the sidearm, and he fired 3 times into the assassin's face at point-blank range. The Kreth dropped without a sound. Pain exploded through Jinwoo's body as the toxin spread. But he turned to face the remaining threats. 2 more assassins were converging on their position. Adjusting to the unexpected interference, he raised his weapon again. But his arm would not cooperate. The gun slipped from fingers that had lost all feeling. "Run!" he gasped at Seraphel. "Get behind cover." The princess stared at him with an expression he could not read. Her markings pulsed in frantic patterns of violet and crimson. "You are injured," she whispered. "You are dying. That does not matter right now," Jinwoo said through gritted teeth. "What matters is that you survive." More gunfire erupted across the hall as the other human security personnel finally reached the fight. They had not been affected by the Valori-specific disruptor, and they engaged the remaining assassins with the brutal efficiency of trained soldiers. Jinwoo tried to stay upright, to maintain position between the princess and any remaining threats. But his legs gave out beneath him. He collapsed against the royal table, leaving a smear of red blood across the pristine white cloth. Seraphel caught him before he could fall to the floor. Her hands felt warm against his cold skin, her grip surprisingly strong for someone who looked so delicate. "Why?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why would you do this?" "You do not know me. You owe me nothing." Jinwoo tried to smile, though he suspected it came out as more of a grimace. "I told you already," he managed, his voice growing weaker with each word. "Someone has to stand between danger and those who need protection. That is what I do. That is who I am." His vision was fading now, darkness creeping in from the edges. He could hear the sounds of combat continuing around them, but it seemed very far away. "Is she safe?" he asked, though he was no longer sure who he was asking. "I am safe," Seraphel answered, tears streaming down her luminous cheeks. "Because of you, I am safe." "Good," Jinwoo breathed. "That is good." His eyes closed. The last thing he felt was the princess holding him, her warmth fighting against the cold that had claimed his body. Then there was nothing. Queen Aethera arrived at the banquet hall minutes later, surrounded by a fresh contingent of guards who had not been affected by the disruptor. The fighting was over. Human security forces had eliminated the remaining assassins with cold precision. The Kreth ambassador was being held at gunpoint, his diplomatic immunity worth nothing in the face of such obvious treachery. But the Queen barely noticed any of this. Her attention was fixed on her daughter, still kneeling on the blood-stained floor, still cradling the body of the human who had saved her life. Ethera approached slowly, her ancient senses reaching out to assess the situation. She felt her daughter's grief and shock. She felt the fading remnants of the dying guards, and she felt something else. Something that made her stop in her tracks. The human's consciousness was still present, barely. A faint ember refusing to be extinguished. It burned with an intensity she had never encountered before. Not in 10,000 years of touching minds at the boundary of death. There was no fear in him, no regret, no desperate clinging to life. There was only a quiet satisfaction that he had done what needed to be done. And a hope that it had been enough. "Mother," Seraphel said, looking up with tear-filled eyes. "He saved me. He put himself between me and the blade." He did not hesitate, not even for a moment. Ethera knelt beside her daughter and looked at the human's face. He was so young by her standards, barely a breath of time in his short lifespan, and yet he had given that brief life without hesitation for someone he had known for only hours. "I know," the Queen said softly. "I can feel the echo of his choice. It burns like a star." She placed her hand on the human's chest, feeling the stillness where his heart had stopped. The medics were already pronouncing him dead, recording the time and cause for official reports. But Ethera was not ready to let this story end. Not yet. "Clear the room," she commanded, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Your Majesty?" One of her advisors questioned. "I said clear the room," Ethera repeated, and something in her tone allowed no argument as the others withdrew. The Queen remained kneeling beside the fallen human, her mind racing through possibilities that had not been considered for 3,000 years. She would not let this fire go out. She refused. The diplomatic vessel Celestial Harmony drifted through the cold silence of neutral space, its hull gleaming under distant starlight like a jewel suspended in eternal darkness. Sergeant Jinwoo Park stood at his post near the observation deck, watching delegates from 2 alien civilizations pretend to be civil with each other. He had been a soldier for 12 years and a security contractor for 3 more. And he had learned to recognize tension hiding beneath polite smiles. The Valori moved like living light, their tall, elegant forms wrapped in robes that shimmered with colors. Humans had no names, for their skin held a soft glow, and delicate markings along their necks and arms pulsed with bioluminescence that shifted with their emotions. They were beautiful in a way that made humans feel clumsy and rough by comparison. The Kreth were different entirely. They stood shorter than humans, but broader, their gray skin thick like armor, their eyes small and calculating. They spoke in harsh syllables and moved with military precision that Jinwoo recognized from his own training. These were not diplomats by nature, but warriors forced into formal clothing. Jinwoo adjusted his position and scanned the room again. His job was simple in theory, but complicated in practice. He was supposed to protect everyone on this vessel, but nobody wanted his protection. The Valori Honor Guard considered humans beneath their notice, primitive creatures useful only for their surprising resilience in combat. The Kreth viewed all other species as either threats or tools, and the other human security personnel mostly kept to themselves. Counting down the days until this assignment ended, he did not mind being ignored. Quiet posts meant fewer chances for things to go wrong, but something about this negotiation made his instincts whisper warnings he could not quite understand. The Valori sovereignty needed allies against Kreth expansion, and humanity had proven itself capable in the border conflicts of recent years. This meeting was supposed to create a formal alliance, A partnership that would reshape Galactic. Politics for generations. Too much was at stake for everyone involved. That was exactly why Jinwoo felt uneasy. He had seen enough of war to know that desperation made people dangerous when survival hung in the balance. Honor and protocol became luxuries few could afford. His attention shifted as a figure approached him. Princess Seraphel moved with the grace of flowing water, her violet markings pulsing softly with curiosity. She was young by Valori standards, barely past her first century. Though she looked no older than a human in her 20s, her eyes held the silver shine of her species. And when she looked at Jinwoo, he felt as though she could see straight through him. "You are the human guard," she said, her voice carrying musical undertones that seemed to resonate in his chest. "Yes, Your Highness," Jinwoo replied, keeping his tone neutral and respectful. "I have never spoken with a human before," Seraphel continued, stopping beside him to gaze out at the stars. "You are smaller than I expected, but your presence feels heavier somehow, like a stone that refuses to be moved." Jinwoo was not sure how to respond to that. "I am just doing my job." "Your Highness, your job is to protect strangers," she said, turning to study his face with open fascination. "Beings you have never met, species you do not understand. And yet you stand ready to place yourself between them and danger. Why do humans do this?" He considered the question carefully. It deserved an honest answer. "Because someone has to," he said finally. "There are always people who cannot protect themselves. And there are always threats they cannot face alone. If those of us who can fight choose not to, then what is the point of our strength?" Seraphel's markings flickered through several colors he could not interpret. "Among my people, the honor guard serves the throne because of sacred oaths sworn across generations. They protect royalty because their bloodlines are bound to ours. But you have no such bond to me or my mother. You could walk away at any moment." "I could," Jinwoo agreed, "but I will not." "Why?" He met her silver eyes directly. "Because I gave my word, and because it is the right thing to do. That is enough for me." The princess was silent for a long moment when she spoke again. Her voice held something like wonder. "My mother believes humans are useful, but primitive. She says your species burns too bright and too fast, accomplishing much in your short lives, but leaving little lasting wisdom. I am beginning to think she may be wrong about you." Before Jinwoo could respond, movement at the edge of his vision caught his attention. One of the Kreth attendants was behaving strangely. The alien stood near the refreshment stations, his hands moving in small, deliberate patterns that seemed unconnected to his stated task of arranging cups. Jinwoo had seen similar movements before, in soldiers preparing weapons concealed beneath formal wear. His body tensed without conscious decision. "Your Highness, please excuse me," he said quietly. "I need to speak with the head of security." Seraphel noticed the change in his demeanor immediately. Her markings shifted to a cautious blue. "Is something wrong?" "Probably not," Jinwoo lied smoothly. "Just routine verification. Please stay near your honor guard." He moved through the crowd with practiced ease, neither rushing nor drawing attention. His eyes tracked the suspicious attendant while his mind calculated distances and angles. The Kreth had positioned himself with clear sightlines to both the Valori delegation and the main exits. That was not the behavior of a servant. Jinwoo found Commander Thalas of the Valori Honor Guard near the ceremonial stage. A tall alien looked down at him with barely concealed disdain. "What do you want, human?" "Commander, I believe one of the Kreth attendants may be compromised," Jinwoo said in a low voice. "Third refreshment station, gray uniform with silver trim." His movements suggest concealed weapons. Thalas made a sound of dismissal. "You presume to instruct me on security matters? My guards have scanned every being on this vessel. There are no weapons beyond those carried by authorized personnel. Scans can be fooled, Jinwoo pressed. I have seen soldiers hide blades in ways that defeat standard detection, please. At least have someone verify his credentials. I will not disrupt these negotiations based on the paranoid suspicions of a human mercenary, Thalas said coldly. Return to your post and leave security matters to those qualified to handle them. Jinwoo wanted to argue, but he recognized the futility. The Valkyrie would not listen to him until something forced him to. He stepped back with a respectful nod that hid his frustration. As you wish. Commander. He returned to his position near the observation deck. But his attention never left the suspicious attendant Tumor Creth. Servants had taken up positions that completed a tactical triangle around the Valari delegation. Jinwoo's hand drifted to his sidearm. The weapon felt reassuring against his palm. A familiar weight in an unfamiliar situation across the room. Princess Seraphil caught his eye. Her markings had shifted to an anxious yellow, and he realized she had been watching him. Since he returned, she was smarter than the honor guard. Gave her credit for she knew something was wrong. Even if she did not know what Jinwoo. Gave her a small nod meant to be reassuring, whatever happened next. He would not let harm reach her. That was his promise. Spoken only to himself, but binding nonetheless, he would stand between the princess and danger. No matter the cost. The evening continued with speeches and toasts and elaborate displays of diplomatic courtesy, and beneath it all, tension wound tighter with every passing moment, waiting for the spark that would set everything ablaze.